Tuesday morning started like any other. Coffee brewing, shower running, the familiar sounds of Cleo getting ready for her fitness influencer routine downstairs. I sat at my laptop checking our accounts before heading to the fintech office where I manage data security protocols. Routine stuff, until the numbers made no sense. Our joint savings account showed 4763s. Yesterday it held $127,000. The retirement fund displayed zero. My business reserves, carefully built over 15 years of careful investing, had vanished overnight. $340,000 gone. "Cleo," I called downstairs, my voice cracking slightly. "Can you come up here for a second?" She appeared in the doorway, yoga pants and sports bra, phone in hand as always. Her dark hair was pulled back in that perfect ponytail she wore for her morning workout videos. She looked radiant, glowing even. Too radiant for someone whose family accounts had just been cleaned out. "What's wrong, Finn?" she asked, but something in her tone suggested she already knew. "Our money, all of it. Someone transferred everything out of our accounts." I turned the laptop screen toward her. "Look at this. The savings, the retirement funds, even my business account, everything's gone." Cleo walked over and glanced at the screen. Then she did something I'll never forget. She laughed. Not a surprised laugh or a nervous giggle. A genuine, delighted laugh that sent ice through my veins. "No one will believe you," she said, setting down her phone and crossing her arms. "Think about it, Finn. Hysterical husband, financially unstable, history of paranoid behavior. I've been building that narrative for months." The room seemed to tilt. "What are you talking about? What narrative?" "The emails to your sister about your concerning mood swings. The conversations with your boss about your increasing irritability at work. The appointment I made for you with Dr. Brennan to discuss your anxiety issues." She counted these off on her fingers like items on a shopping list. "Even the neighbors have noticed how agitated you've become lately." I stared at her. This woman I'd been married to for 8 years, mother of our twin boys, was describing a calculated campaign to undermine my credibility. "You planned this." "Of course I planned this. Did you think I'd spend the rest of my life married to a mediocre middle manager in Connecticut, watching you fix that pathetic BMW every weekend while pretending we're some kind of power couple?" Her voice carried a venom I'd never heard before. "I deserve better than this suburban prison." My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. "I'm calling the bank. This is fraud. This is what, exactly? Your wife accessing joint accounts that she's legally entitled to use? Accounts where she's been the primary contributor for the past 2 years while your little security consulting business barely breaks even?" Cleo moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Face it, Finn. You're finished. And the beautiful part is, everyone will think you're having a breakdown when you try to explain it." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Oh, and don't bother looking for Marcus. He's helping me with some business arrangements. You remember Marcus, right? Your best friend? Your business partner? The one who's been covering your share of the office rent for 6 months?" The door closed behind her with a soft click. I sat there staring at the laptop screen, at those impossible numbers, trying to process what had just happened. My wife had stolen our life savings, and my best friend was helping her do it. But Cleo had made one crucial mistake. When she'd set her phone down to cross her arms, she hadn't ended the voice recording app I'd noticed running. The app she used to capture audio for her fitness content was still active, still recording. 9 minutes and 37 seconds of her confession, stored in the cloud, automatically backed up to 3 different servers. She was right about one thing. No one would believe me. Not yet. But they would. I spent the next 3 days mapping the transfers. My background in financial security systems gave me advantages Cleo hadn't anticipated. Every electronic transaction leaves fingerprints, and I knew how to read them. The money hadn't simply vanished. It had been systematically moved through a series of intermediate accounts, each transfer small enough to avoid automatic fraud detection. The pattern suggested someone with inside knowledge of banking protocols. Someone like Marcus, whose consulting firm specialized in financial software implementation. Marcus Veldon had been my closest friend since college. We'd started our careers together, been each other's best man, spent countless weekends working on projects in my garage. When I'd started my security consulting business, he'd provided the initial funding and office space. The betrayal cut deeper than Cleo's theft. I drove to his downtown office Thursday afternoon. The receptionist, a young woman named Katie, who'd always been friendly, seemed uncomfortable when she saw me. "Is Marcus available?" I asked. "He's in meetings all day," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Would you like to schedule something for next week?" "Tell him Finn Darrow is here about the account transfers." Katie's face went pale. She picked up her phone and spoke quietly for a moment, then hung up. "He'll see you now." Marcus's corner office overlooked the harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive furniture, awards and photos covering one wall. He stood behind his desk as I entered, not offering his usual handshake or smile. "Finn, I was wondering when you'd show up." "Were you?" I closed the door behind me and took a seat without being invited. Wondering or hoping I wouldn't figure it out. He sat down slowly, his expression guarded. "I don't know what Cleo told you, but she told me you're helping her with business arrangements. She told me you've been covering my office rent. She told me I'm finished." I leaned forward. What she didn't tell me is why my best friend decided to help my wife steal everything I've worked for. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the harbor. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You have no idea how hard it's been, watching you waste your potential. Brilliant mind, advanced degrees, and you're satisfied being a small-time consultant in a rented office. Cleo deserves more than that. She deserves someone who can match her ambition. Someone like you. Someone like me." He turned back to face me. "This isn't personal, Finn. It's business. Cleo's fitness brand has serious growth potential. With proper funding and management, she could build a real empire. Your security consulting brings in maybe $60,000 a year on a good year. That's not enough for the life she wants." I pulled out my phone and showed him the banking app. "So you helped her steal $300,000 to fund her empire." "Joint accounts, Finn. Legally accessible to both parties. No theft involved." Marcus opened his laptop and turned it toward me. "In fact, if you check the documentation, you'll find that Cleo's been contributing 70% of your household income for the past 18 months. Her influencer revenue, sponsorship deals, personal training fees, she's been carrying you financially." The spreadsheet on his screen detailed every deposit and withdrawal from our accounts going back 2 years. The numbers told a story I hadn't been paying attention to. Cleo's income had grown steadily, while mine had stagnated. She'd been supporting us while I'd been oblivious. Even if that's true, she can't just drain our accounts without discussion. We're married. We have kids. Kids who deserve better than watching their father struggle to pay basic bills while their mother builds a successful business. Marcus closed the laptop. "Cleo filed for divorce yesterday. Her attorney will contact you about custody arrangements and asset division." I felt the walls closing in. "And you? What do you get out of this?" "I get to help someone I care about achieve her potential. And yes, I get a business partnership with someone who shares my vision for success." He stood up and walked to the window. "You can fight this, Finn. Hire lawyers, make accusations, try to convince people that your wife and best friend conspired against you. But think about how that's going to sound. Think about how it's going to look." He was right, and we both knew it. A bitter husband making wild claims about theft and conspiracy would sound exactly like what Cleo had been preparing people to expect. A man having a breakdown. I stood to leave, then noticed something on Marcus's desk. A small digital recorder, the kind lawyers use for depositions. The red light was blinking. "Recording our conversation?" I asked. "Insurance," he said, "in case you decide to make threats or accusations later. Just protecting myself." I smiled for the first time in days. Good thinking. I've been doing the same thing. His confident expression flickered slightly. What do you mean? I mean, Cleo's confession is sitting on 3 different servers right now. 9 minutes of her explaining exactly how she planned this theft and exactly how you helped her execute it. I headed for the door. You might want to call your insurance company. That evening, I sat in my garage workshop analyzing the audio file. Cleo's voice was crystal clear as she described her months of preparation, the emails to my family and employer, the fake therapy appointment, the careful construction of a narrative that would make me look unstable when I discovered the missing money. But the recording contained something even more valuable, details about the transfer process that proved Marcus's involvement. Cleo mentioned specific account numbers, authorization codes, and timing that only someone with banking system access could have provided. I uploaded the audio to a secure server and made copies on multiple devices. Then I started making calls. My first call was to Janet Morrison, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on corporate security cases. She agreed to meet me Friday morning to review the transaction records. This is sophisticated, Janet said, studying the transfer patterns on her computer. Whoever set this up knew exactly how to avoid triggering fraud alerts. The amounts, the timing, the intermediate accounts. This required inside knowledge. Can you trace where the money went? Some of it. 3 transfers went to established investment accounts in your wife's name. 2 went to business accounts for something called Darrow Fitness Enterprises. The rest moved through a series of shell companies that will take time to unravel. She printed out a summary report. But here's the interesting part. The authorization codes used for the transfers were generated from your business partner's system. Marcus's system? Either his system or someone with administrative access to his system. The digital signatures match his company's authentication protocols. Janet handed me the printout. This isn't just marital asset reallocation, Finn. This is fraud. Systematic, premeditated fraud. My second call was to Tom Bradley, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. Tom had helped me with background checks for security consulting clients, and I trusted his discretion. I need surveillance on 2 people, I told him. My wife and my business partner. I need to know where they go, who they meet with, what they're planning. Divorce case? Theft case? Maybe conspiracy? I'll send you the details. Tom's first report arrived Monday morning. Cleo and Marcus had been meeting regularly for 3 months, always at his downtown apartment, always when I was working late or traveling for consulting jobs. The surveillance photos showed them entering and leaving together, clearly comfortable with each other, clearly more than business partners. But the report contained something unexpected. A third person had been present at several meetings. Jennifer Walsh, Cleo's best friend and social media manager. Jennifer handled Cleo's online presence, managed her sponsorship deals, and coordinated her fitness events. If she was involved in the planning, the conspiracy was larger than I'd realized. I spent Tuesday morning researching Jennifer's background. She'd been arrested for credit card fraud in college, charges later dropped. She'd worked for 2 fitness companies that had folded amid financial irregularities. She'd been sued by a former business partner for unauthorized use of company funds. Cleo hadn't just chosen a business manager, she'd chosen an accomplice with experience. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Sarah Brennan, the therapist Cleo had mentioned, knocked on my door around 4 o'clock. Mr. Darrow, I'm Dr. Brennan. Your wife scheduled an appointment for you, but you never showed up. I wanted to check on your well-being. I invited her in and explained the situation. The missing money, Cleo's confession, the evidence I'd gathered. Dr. Brennan listened carefully, taking notes. Your wife described you as increasingly paranoid and financially irresponsible, she said when I finished. She was concerned about your mental state and your ability to care for your children. And now? Now I'm concerned about her mental state. The behavior you're describing suggests antisocial personality traits and possible narcissistic disorder. The systematic deception, the lack of empathy, the calculated manipulation. These aren't the actions of someone concerned about their spouse's well-being. Dr. Brennan agreed to document our conversation and provide a written assessment of the situation. Another piece of evidence for the growing file. By Wednesday evening, I had enough material to contact law enforcement. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit agreed to review the case, particularly given the interstate nature of some transfers and Marcus's involvement in multiple banking systems. Special Agent Lisa Chen met with me Thursday morning at the Federal Building downtown. She reviewed the audio recording, the transaction analysis, the surveillance reports, and Dr. Brennan's assessment. "This is solid evidence of wire fraud and conspiracy," Agent Chen said. "The recording alone establishes intent and premeditation. Combined with the financial analysis and the pattern of deception, we have grounds for criminal charges." "How long will the investigation take?" "Weeks, possibly months. Financial crimes require careful documentation, especially when they involve multiple parties and complex transfers. But based on what you've shown me, I'm confident we can build a strong case." I left the Federal Building feeling hopeful for the first time since discovering the theft. Cleo had been right about one thing: no one would have believed my story without evidence. But evidence, properly gathered and documented, tells its own story. The investigation moved faster than Agent Chen had predicted. By the following Tuesday, federal agents had executed search warrants on Marcus's office and Cleo's fitness studio. They seized computers, phones, financial records, and backup drives containing months of communications between the conspirators. I wasn't allowed to observe the searches, but Tom Bradley's surveillance team captured photos of agents loading boxes of evidence into government vehicles. The sight of Marcus being led out of his office in handcuffs made the local news that evening. Cleo's arrest came the next morning. I was having coffee in my kitchen when I saw the federal vehicles pull into our driveway. Through the window, I watched Agent Chen and 2 other agents walk to the front door. Cleo answered in her workout clothes, probably preparing for another fitness video. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes. Cleo's confident posture gradually changed as the agents explained why they were there. Her hands went to her hips, then crossed defensively over her chest, then hung limply at her sides as the handcuffs went on. She looked toward the kitchen window as they led her to the car. Even from 30 feet away, I could see the fury in her eyes. She mouthed something that looked like, "You'll pay for this," before the agent helped her into the back seat. The twins, David and Michael, were at school during the arrest. I picked them up that afternoon and tried to explain what was happening in terms they could understand. 8-year-olds don't need to hear about fraud and conspiracy, but they deserve to know why their mother wouldn't be coming home. "Mom took money that didn't belong to her," I said as we sat in the living room. "She's going to have to stay in jail until the police figure out what to do." "Is she coming back?" David asked. "I don't know. That depends on what the judge decides." Michael, always the more practical of the twins, had a different question. "Are we going to be okay?" "We're going to be fine," I told him, hoping it was true. "We have each other, and we have this house, and I'm going to take care of you, no matter what happens." The next few days brought a series of revelations as federal investigators analyzed the seized evidence. Agent Chen called Friday afternoon with an update. "The conspiracy was more extensive than we initially thought," she said. "Jennifer Walsh wasn't just helping with social media. She was the one who researched the banking protocols and identified the vulnerabilities Marcus could exploit. She has a background in financial systems that your wife failed to mention." "How much money are we talking about total?" "Close to $400,000 when you include the investment accounts and business transfers. But here's the interesting part. They were planning a second phase. Communications on Jennifer's computer show they intended to access your client's accounts through your security consulting business." The scope of the betrayal kept expanding. They hadn't just stolen my savings. They'd been planning to destroy my professional reputation and potentially implicate me in their crimes against my own clients. "There's something else," Agent Chen continued. "DNA evidence from items seized at Marcus's apartment suggests he's the biological father of your children. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered on the kitchen counter. I'd suspected something was wrong with my marriage, but I'd never questioned the twins' parentage. They looked like me, acted like me, called me Dad without hesitation. Are you certain? The lab is running confirmatory tests, but the preliminary results are conclusive. Your wife's affair with Marcus goes back at least 9 years, possibly longer. I sat down heavily in the nearest chair. 9 years. The twins were 8. Cleo had been cheating with Marcus before we were even married, possibly from the beginning of our relationship. Does this change the criminal case? It adds additional charges related to identity fraud and false documentation, but more importantly for you, it strengthens your position in any custody proceedings. The court will need to determine legal parentage, but given your role as the children's primary father figure, you'll likely retain custody regardless of biology. After hanging up, I walked upstairs to the twins' room. They were building something elaborate with blocks, working together the way they always did, David handling design while Michael managed construction. They looked up when I entered, identical smiles on faces that suddenly seemed less familiar. Dad, look what we're building, Michael said, gesturing to their creation. It's a castle with secret passages. That's amazing, I said, sitting on the floor beside them. Can you show me how the passages work? For the next hour, I listened to their explanations and helped with construction, trying to process the fact that these children I'd raised from birth weren't genetically mine. But watching them work, hearing them laugh, seeing their excitement about their project, I realized it didn't matter. Biology might determine eye color and height, but fatherhood was built through bedtime stories and soccer practices and helping with homework. They were my sons in every way that mattered. The federal prosecutor assigned to the case, Assistant U.S. Attorney Robert Hayes, met with me in preparation for trial testimony. The government had built a comprehensive case around the audio recording, financial analysis, and digital communications seized during the investigation. Your wife's defense attorney is arguing that she believed she had legitimate access to the joint accounts, Hayes explained. They're claiming this was a marital dispute, not criminal fraud. What about the recording? She clearly describes it as theft. That's our strongest evidence. But they're going to argue that she was speaking emotionally, that her words were taken out of context, that the stress of marital problems caused her to exaggerate. Hayes reviewed his notes. The conspiracy charges are stronger. The communications between your wife, Marcus, and Jennifer show clear premeditation and intent to defraud. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in February. I sat in the gallery watching Cleo enter the courtroom in a conservative blue suit, her hair styled professionally, her expression composed. She looked like the successful businesswoman she'd always claimed to be, not like someone accused of stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Marcus sat at a separate defense table with his own attorney. His usual confidence had been replaced by nervous energy, constantly adjusting his tie, shuffling papers, avoiding eye contact with everyone, including Cleo. Jennifer Walsh had accepted a plea agreement in exchange for testimony against her co-conspirators. She took the stand on the second day and methodically described the planning process, the research into banking vulnerabilities, the coordination of transfers, and the construction of the false narrative about my mental state. Cleo wanted to make sure that when Finn discovered the missing money, no one would believe his accusations, Jennifer testified. She spent months sending emails to his family and employer suggesting that he was becoming unstable and paranoid about finances. The prosecutor played the audio recording on the third day. 9 minutes and 37 seconds of Cleo's voice filling the courtroom, describing her theft with casual arrogance. The jury listened in complete silence as she explained how she'd manipulated everyone around me to discredit my credibility in advance. "No one will believe you," her recorded voice said through the courtroom speakers. "Hysterical husband, financially unstable, history of paranoid behavior. I've been building that narrative for months." I watched the jurors' faces as they heard her confession. Several looked disgusted. One woman shook her head in apparent disbelief. The foreman, a middle-aged man who reminded me of my father, took careful notes throughout the entire recording. Cleo's defense attorney tried to minimize the recording's impact during cross-examination, but the damage was done. Her own words had convicted her more effectively than any prosecutor's argument. The defense case lasted only 2 days. Cleo's attorney argued that she'd been emotionally distraught during the recorded conversation, that she'd exaggerated her role in what was essentially a marital financial dispute. Character witnesses described her charitable work and business success, painting a picture of someone incapable of systematic fraud. Cleo herself took the stand on the final day, tearfully explaining that she'd only been trying to protect her financial contributions to the marriage from my increasingly erratic behavior. She claimed the recording captured her at her lowest point, speaking out of anger and frustration rather than describing actual criminal activity. "I never intended to steal anything," she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "I was trying to safeguard money I'd earned through my own business efforts. I was scared of what Finn might do if his financial problems got worse." The prosecutor's cross-examination was devastating. Using bank records and email communications, he systematically demonstrated that Cleo's protection of marital assets involved transferring money to accounts I had no access to, establishing business entities without my knowledge, and coordinating with Marcus to exploit his banking system privileges. "Ms. Darrow, did you inform your husband before transferring $127,000 from your joint savings account?" "No, but..." "Did you inform him before moving $89,000 from his retirement fund?" "No, but I was planning to..." "Did you inform him before establishing Darrow Fitness Enterprises and transferring $124,000 to its operating account?" "No." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and delivered guilty verdicts on all charges: wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. Marcus received similar verdicts. Jennifer's plea agreement had already been accepted. Judge Patricia Morrison scheduled sentencing for the following month. As the bailiffs led Cleo away in handcuffs, she turned and looked directly at me for the first time since the trial began. The fury I'd seen during her arrest had been replaced by something else: defeat, maybe, or simple exhaustion. Sentencing day arrived with unexpected drama. Cleo's family had flown in from Portugal for the hearing: her father, a retired diplomat; her mother, a socialite who'd never worked a day in her life; and her brother, a banker who'd somehow avoided involvement in her schemes. They sat in the front row behind the defense table, dressed in expensive clothes and radiating the kind of inherited confidence that comes from generations of wealth and privilege. I recognized the type from my years in financial consulting: people who'd never faced real consequences for their actions because money and connections had always provided protection. Judge Morrison called the court to order and asked if the defendants had anything to say before sentencing. Marcus spoke first, offering a brief apology that sounded rehearsed and hollow. He blamed his actions on poor judgment and financial pressure, accepting responsibility while somehow avoiding actual accountability. Cleo's statement was longer and more dramatic. She described her childhood, her struggles as an immigrant family's daughter, her efforts to build a successful business in a competitive industry. She apologized to me and the children, claiming that desperation and fear had driven her to make terrible decisions. "I never meant to hurt my family," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I was trying to secure our future, to build something lasting for my children. I made mistakes, serious mistakes, but they came from love, not greed." It was a masterful performance, delivered with exactly the right combination of remorse and vulnerability. If I hadn't heard the recording of her laughing about my stupidity, I might have been moved by her apparent sincerity. The prosecutor's sentencing recommendation was harsh but fair: 7 years for Cleo, 4 years for Marcus, reflecting their respective roles in the conspiracy. He detailed the sophistication of their scheme, the months of planning involved, and the devastating impact on the victims, not just me, but potentially my consulting clients who'd been targeted for the second phase of their operation. Judge Morrison listened to all arguments before delivering her decision. She sentenced Cleo to 7 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation and full restitution of the stolen funds. Marcus received 4 years and similar restitution requirements, but the judge had additional consequences in mind. Cleo's father, whose diplomatic status had been revoked during the investigation, faced deportation proceedings for his own financial crimes uncovered during the federal inquiry. Her mother's assets, traced to accounts connected to her husband's illegal activities, were frozen pending further investigation. The family's wealth and privilege, built on decades of corruption and fraud, was crumbling in real time. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse with Agent Chen and Prosecutor Hayes, watching Cleo's family huddle together in obvious distress. Their daughter was going to prison, their patriarch faced deportation, and their social status was destroyed. "How much of the money will you recover?" I asked. "Most of it," Hayes replied. "The investment accounts are intact, the business transfers can be reversed, and we've identified the shell company assets. You'll probably get back around 90% of what was stolen." "And the twins?" "The custody hearing is next week, but given the circumstances, you'll retain full legal custody regardless of the paternity issues. The court recognizes you as their psychological and legal father." Agent Chen handed me her business card. "If you need anything during the appeals process or if any other issues arise, call me directly. Cases like this sometimes have complications." I thanked them and walked to my car, feeling simultaneously vindicated and empty. Justice had been served, the money would be returned, and I'd keep custody of the children. But the life I'd built over 8 years of marriage was gone, destroyed by people I'd trusted completely. The drive home took me past Marcus's office building, now displaying a for lease sign where his company's logo used to hang. His business had collapsed within weeks of his arrest, clients fleeing and employees finding new jobs. His reputation in the financial consulting industry was finished. I parked in my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house Cleo and I had bought when the twins were babies. We'd planned to raise our family here, to build memories and traditions, to grow old together in these rooms. Now, it felt like a museum of failed dreams. David and Michael were waiting inside with Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who'd been helping with childcare during the trial. They ran to greet me as I entered, excited to hear about their day at school, eager to show me their latest projects. "Dad, guess what happened in science class today?" David said, pulling me toward the kitchen table where his homework was spread out. "Mrs. Johnson let us use the microscopes to look at pond water," Michael added. "We saw tiny animals swimming around." I sat down with them and listened to their stories, helped with their math problems, and made dinner while they worked on art projects. The routine felt normal and comforting after months of legal proceedings and uncertainty. Later, after they'd gone to bed, I sat in my workshop reviewing the financial documents Agent Chen had returned to me. Bank statements, investment records, business accounts, the paper trail of my former life, now being slowly restored. Cleo's recording was still saved on my phone, still backed up to multiple servers. 9 minutes and 37 seconds that had changed everything. I played it one more time, listening to her confident voice describing my destruction, and then deleted it from my phone. I didn't need it anymore. Justice had been served, and it was time to move forward.